I know a lot of people growing up tend to love the story of Gulliver's Travels, but for me it was not something that I fell in love with until I was at university and I was studying Gulliver's Travels by Jonathan Swift, and it was at that point that I fell in love with the story. And I have to say my favourite part of the story is the Wynnum, but usually Gulliver's Travels tend to focus on Lilliput, and that's certainly the case here with the 2010 film. And this is a pretty good film. It's not awful, but I will say it's more of a children's film than a family film. If you have read the novel and are looking for an interesting adaptation, this probably isn't the best option. I haven't actually seen that many other adaptations of Gulliver's Travels, so if you do have any recommendations for a really good version, please do let me know. I'd really love to see it, especially one that tackles the Wynnum. I think that would be very fascinating to see. But this film, if you're looking to introduce maybe a young child to the story of Gulliver's Travels, I think it's pretty alright. As I said, released in 2010. It's directed by Rob Letterman and written by Nicholas Stoller and Joe Stillman, of course based on the story by Jonathan Swift. And one of the things that I do like about this is the cast. The cast is pretty amazing. So Jack Black plays Gulliver, not that bothered about that, but Jason Segel is in it, Emily Blunt, Billy Connolly, Chris O'Dowd, James Corden if you care, Catherine Tate. It's absolutely incredible. The casting is beautiful. So even if, when I was watching it, I was like, well, this is a very juvenile interpretation that children will enjoy, but I'm not getting much out of it. Joe Trulio is also in it. His character name is Butt Crack Man, which says a lot about that. In fact, that just basically supports what I've just said about being quite a juvenile adaptation. But for the target, if that's the target audience, then that's fine. I think it works quite well. From a technical perspective, it visually looks very good. The lighting's good. The CGI is decent. And the reason that that's important, of course, is because when Gulliver goes to Lilliput, he is obviously, to them, a giant. If you're not familiar with this first part of the story of Gulliver's Travels, basically Gulliver is a travel writer in this film. He ends up in Lilliput, where he is huge. The Lilliputians are tiny. They're kind of like borrower size, they're little borrowers. And he ends up being, first of all, this big menacing figure, and they try and capture him. And then the film's basically all about him trying to help them out, and those little people not judging him for being a giant. He's not necessarily an evil person. And you can read into that what you will, but I think a lot of it could be said that it's about not judging people based on their height or lack thereof, I guess. As a story, it's very interesting. I love the novel, as I said. In terms of, it's taken quite a bit of creative license with adapting it. It's not word for word, scene for scene, or whatever. But the basic elements are there that you will recognise if you are a fan of the story. And as I said, technically it looks pretty good. I didn't see any point in it. I didn't see at any point somewhere where I thought the CGI looked off, or it looked blatantly obvious that, that Jack Black wasn't like 10 times the rest of the cast or whatever in terms of height. I think it looked good pretty visually. The costumes were really good. I think the set designs were really, really, really impressive. I really liked that. The lighting was very good. I don't have any specific complaints. If I judge it as a film on its own, if I hadn't read the book and I was maybe a bit younger, I think I would have really enjoyed this. 4.9 out of 10 is the average IMDb rating across 66,000 reviews. I'd say that's maybe a tiny bit harsh, because yes, in terms of being an adaptation, it's not great. But if this had been created on its own and it was a fresh story, and we look at, the cinematography and the acting and the casting and the costumes and the lighting and the directing and the set designs, it seems to tick pretty much every box going in some way. So certainly it's not bad, and I don't think it's bad at all, but judging it as an adaptation, which is what I was hoping to watch it to enjoy an adaptation, it's not great. It's fine for children. Kind of marketed as, well, it's PG, so it's family friendly. but I definitely think it'll appeal more to younger people than it will to older people. Not a bad film. Not great. Probably wouldn't watch it again. The casting is certainly impressive. The adaptation not so much. Pretty mediocre.